But I'm going to start by sharing my screen, and then hope that this all works. Are you able to see the screen share? Perfect. So l'absinthe, or absinthe, as it's known, I'm going to run you through a brief history of it, because unlike Degas may be portraying, I think it gets a bad rap, and you guys should know that, because it could be something that you end up enjoying. Maybe not to the point of lethargy and the sadness that that woman had, but okay. So I need to move this for a second. There we go. This is wormwood, or Artemisia absinthium. It's a plant that's native to temperate regions over Eurasia and Northern Africa. Now, Artemisia absinthium has been used in a medicinal capacity since ancient Egypt, and it's mentioned in one of the oldest and most important ancient Egyptian medicinal documents called the Ebers Papyrus, which dates back to 1550 BC. Now, this wormwood and its extracts and wine-soaked wormwood leaves were also used as remedies by the ancient Greeks. And the origin of absinthe's name is thought to come from the Greek word absinthian, which either means wormwood or it means undrinkable. The latter might be due to the fact that the plant has a very, very bitter taste. Now, the use of this bitter wormwood in a drink is further mentioned in Roman philosopher Lucretius's De Rerum Natura, or On the Nature of Things, which was around the 1st century BC. Lucretius indicates that a drink containing wormwood is given as medicine to children in a cup with honey on the brim to make it drinkable. Remember, this stuff is very bitter. So, wormwood drinks have a medicinal effect. And that remains important in absinthe, the liquor, as we fast forward to the goings-on of 18th century Europe. Now, the first evidence of absinthe as a distilled spirit dates back to the late 18th century in Europe. The legend is that absinthe, as we know it, began as an all-purpose remedy created by Dr. Pierre Ordinaire, a French doctor living in Cuvée, Switzerland. Dr. Ordinaire, understanding those medicinal benefits of wormwood, sought to make a tonic that would make ingestion of the wormwood more palatable. Now, he did that by distilling it. And he distilled the wormwood along with a mash of various other botanicals, such as star anise, licorice, fennel, coriander, and a whole bunch of other herbs and botanicals. Now, Ordinaire's recipe was then passed on to the Henriade sisters of Cuvée, who continued to sell it as a medicinal elixir. And then some years later, in 1797, a man by the name of Major Dubié acquired the formula for distilled absinthe from those Henriade sisters. Now, Mr. Dubié opened the first absinthe distillery in Cuvée with his son Marcellin and son-in-law Henri-Louis Pernot. They aptly named the distillery Dubié, Père et Fils, or Dubié, Father and Sons. Now, in 1805, they built a second distillery in Pontarlier, France, under the company name Maison Pernod Fils. Now, this brand remained one of the most popular brands of absinthe up to its ban in France in 1914. I'd like to note that you may have seen at the beginning of the presentation, but Pernod Fils is an alcohol volume of 68%. Comparison, Jack Daniel's whiskey is about 35%, and your Grey Goose vodka has an ABV of 40%. So absinthe can get very, very high in alcohol. I think the one at the title screen was something around 90% alcohol. So wormwood and other herbs distilled into absinthe and sold as a medicinal elixir started to grow in popularity. This was primarily due to the fact that the French troops were operating in areas prone to malaria, and they needed this wormwood to take as a preventative medicine. Now, as history has shown with the gin and tonic, it seems the best way to get a European soldier to take their bitter malaria-preventing tonic is by making it as alcoholic as possible. So these French troops would return from weeks or months or years out of the country, and they would maintain a taste for the anise-flavored absinthe that had staved off their malarial fevers and gotten them properly drunk. So this taste of le fée vert, or the green fairy, due to absinthe's green hue, spread throughout France and became a favorite of all social classes in the country, from the wealthy bourgeoisie to artists and the working class. Now, absinthe began to be widely exported as well and gained further popularity elsewhere in Europe and in the United States. Due to its mass production, it caused the price to drop sharply, and the spirit boomed even further around the continent. In fact, absinthe grew so popular in bars and cabarets by the 1860s that the hour of 5 p.m. was referred to as le vert, or the green hour. It makes you wonder if somewhere in Paris a singer named Jimmy Buffet was singing about it being le vert somewhere. But I digress. I know that's a bad joke. But Jimmy Buffet wouldn't have been the only person or artist excited about absinthe at the time. Avid drinkers of the liquor include painters Manet and Picasso, writers Oscar Wilde and Mark Twain, and even politicians such as our own FDR. They were all known to partake a bit in the Green Fairy. However, due in part to its popularity, absinthe became associated with violent crimes and social disorder, much in the same way that gin had been depicted as the scourge of the populace in London about a century and a half earlier. Some modern takes on these associations claim that the absinthe violence views were due to fabricated claims made by the temperance movement, and they were aided by those in the wine industry that disliked the competition of absinthe in comparison to wine. But nevertheless, the view gained traction. As we saw in Degas' painting, L'Absinthe, I'll try that again, L'Absinthe, the popular view was that absinthe drinkers were addicts. They were sodden and benumbed. This continued on in 1905. A Swiss farmer named Jean Lanfray murdered his family and took his own life after drinking absinthe. Now, Lanfray was an alcoholic. He had imbibed considerable quantities of wine and brandy before killing his family, but that was overlooked, and the blame of the murders was placed solely on his consumption of 2 glasses of absinthe. Granted, 2 glasses of absinthe would have been like drinking 2 glasses of grain alcohol. But those murders were a tipping point in the popular view of the dangers of absinthe, and by 1908, absinthe was first prohibited in the Swiss Constitution. The Netherlands followed suit, banning sales and distribution in 1909, the US in 1912, and France in 1914. By 1915, absinthe had been banned in the United States and in most of Europe. I'll note that it's not since been demonstrated to be any more dangerous than ordinary spirits, albeit it often has a higher alcohol content. Additionally, recent studies have shown that the claims of absinthe's psychoactive properties have also been greatly exaggerated, apart from feeling more drunk than you would on a similar volume. Drinking absinthe won't make you hallucinate, as is erroneously depicted in like popular media. But just know that shot for shot, the absinthe drinker will be under the table much faster than the person shooting vodka. However, we've begun to see a bit of a modern revival in absinthe drinking because starting in the 1990s, EU beverage laws have allowed for expanded production and sale of absinthe. By early 21st century, nearly 200 countries, primarily in France and Switzerland from their origin, but as well in Spain, Austria, and the Czech Republic. You can purchase absinthe in the United States, and you can drink it in the style that the French would have drank it centuries ago, which is shown above. Now, to drink absinthe in the traditional French fashion, you take a measure of absinthe and pour it into a glass, and on top of that glass, you place this perforated metal spoon. On top of the perforated metal spoon, you place a sugar cube, and onto the sugar cube, you pour cool water, which melts the sugar into the absinthe and makes it more palatable. being made from wormwood, it still is bitter. The sugar helps that a bit. So the amount of sugar water added is up to the taste of the drinker, but it's typically about 3 to 5 parts compared to what the absinthe is. Now, this is kind of interesting because if you've ever had absinthe before or diluted it, you can see in the images on the left, once water is added to the absinthe, it actually makes it opaque. And this is because of the wormwood and the phenol and the anise that are inside the alcohol start to become more apparent in the solution and cloud the drink because they have poor water solubility. Now, this is in comparison to on the right is what's called the Bohemian style of absinthe, in which they don't use as much anise or phenol, if at all, and there's no point in actually adding the water. So they just soak a sugar cube in liquor and a high proof liquor and light it on fire to have the sugar melt down into the absinthe. And it obviously doesn't make it opaque either way, so it just sweetens the drink. So finally, if you're thinking, no way, you want to go buy absinthe, but you still want to try it, it's actually possible that you had tried it already, albeit to a lesser extent. The Sazerac, which is a drink popular originally in New Orleans and now all over the US, is made by first rinsing a cold rocks glass with absinthe. This means that you add a few drops of absinthe into the glass and swirl it around to cover the whole surface area, pour out the remainder, and then you add your cocktail ingredients and your garnish. This adds that aroma of licorice and of anise without increasing your cocktail's alcohol proof by double. So if you want to make this, you can buy the minimum amount of absinthe and then put the rest of your money toward cognac and, well, I guess lemons. Or if you really want to go crazy, Ernest Hemingway actually came up with an absinthe cocktail himself, and he called it Death in the Afternoon. Inside of this cocktail, he says, pour 1 jigger absinthe into a champagne glass, add iced champagne until it attains the proper opalescent milkiness, and drink 3 to 5 of these slowly. If you're a fan of black licorice, if you're maybe trying to stave off malaria, or if you're just looking to get drunk in half the time as most of the other liquors in the store, go try a bottle of absinthe or order it next time you're at the bar. Thanks, everyone.
I don't think so. You need a bottle, maybe 3 to 4 shots, but yeah.
3 to 4, 1 to 2.
Well, it looks very pretty when you add water to it. It does look very pretty.
Yeah, I think that happens with other liquors that started to replace absinthe during its ban, like ouzo and some of those other liquors that were produced because absinthe was not able to be purchased.
Wow, thank you. That was a fascinating presentation. I wonder how many artists have painted something that somehow involved absinthe. Probably a lot.
Right.
Or under the influence of absinthe.